All across America and around the world, this is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Good day. I'm Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today here on Veterans Radio, and thanks for joining us. We've got some interesting stories for you. We always want to remind you you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or at the web, veteransradio.org, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.org. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. We just want to remind you that Veterans Radio podcasts are available on all your favorite streaming platforms, including RSS.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Rees Across America Radio. So wherever you are, you can find us, whether it's on your mobile phone or your computer or your laptop, your tablet. But listen in to Veterans Radio Podcasts. We post something new every week, and you're going to find it informative. We want to welcome to Veterans Radio a Marine, a writer. She's a regular contributing writer for military.com, Haley Fuller. Haley, welcome to Veterans Radio.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, you've written a couple of somethings that caught my attention as a regular contributing writer to military.com, that at least one or two of these I want to talk about if we have time. And before we get there, let me mention that to folks that you got your Bachelor's of Art in Psychology from Texas State University. You went on and picked up a Master's of Science in Psychology from Purdue University. You've attended Tulane University Law School and have completed that as you are on your way to bigger and better things in that field. But let's start with this. How did a nice girl like you end up in the Marine Corps?
Well, I used to be a police officer. Right out of college, I was a police officer. And my chief was kind of pushing me to go to the federal law enforcement, like FBI or CIA or something. He constantly told me that, like, he loved me working there, but he thought that I could be in a better, like, that I deserved more than just working patrol in a small town. And so I went to the Marine Corps recruiter's office, the OSO's office, and I was intending on just joining the reserves, but then they asked me to take the flight test, and I ended up passing that, so I took a flight contract with the Marine Corps, and then decided to go active duty for a while.
Well, that's how they got the hook in and they reeled it in. What years did you serve?
2014 through 2021.
And you came out of the Marine Corps as a captain. So a lot of what we're talking about, you've lived. Tell us a little bit about what you did in the Marines.
I did flight school, and then at the end of flight school I had to have surgery, and so I got whammied, and then they ended up putting me like in charge of the MATSIG 21 as the AOIC, so I didn't really get to do anything like interesting or fun.
After you got out of the Marine Corps, you decided some more education was in line, and along the way you found yourself with an opportunity to write for military.com, and gave you a sort of a larger platform to air some ideas out. That's a big turn from a small town cop, isn't it?
People always come up and tell us that we're like oh wow, military.com, such a big publication. I guess it is. I don't really see it that way. I just feel like I'm just kind of writing stories and sending them in. I don't, I don't really feel like I have a I mean, technically I have a platform, but I don't have any social media connected to my writing. So
Well, you told me you write 30 to 40 articles a month
yeah.
for them, so you may not realize you have a platform, but you do have a voice. And one of the things you wrote about that, again, caught my attention is over the last year or so, there's been a lot of criticism about VA disability benefits and how people are either abusing or misusing them. But you really write about how that whole concept is misunderstood. Can you talk a little bit about your thinking in that regards?
Yeah, so people often call it VA disability, and because it comes from what percentage of disability you get, and but it's really called service compensation. And when people hear the word disability, they think of someone that is not able to work, is not, has a diminished capacity to just function in everyday life. They think of people in wheelchairs, amputees, things like that. They often don't associate it with mental health stuff, with toxic exposure, with any other kind of moral injuries, any other kind of what we would call invisible injuries. Um, so yeah, people just they equate VA disability with SSDI right now, and it's not the same thing at
So,
all.
so you actually write there is a more civilian equivalent, and you write about how think about this as workers' compensation. Expand on those concepts.
Well, if you were to get hurt at a civilian job, you would qualify for workers' compensation, right? When a member of the military gets hurt at work, they are not allowed to sue the federal government under the Tort Claims Act because of the Ferris Doctrine. And this has been revisited quite a few times. People are still currently trying to have it overturned, but one of the main reasons that the Supreme Court cites to continue applying the Ferris Doctrine is the existence of VA compensation because they view that as workers' compensation for the military because it is compensating a person for the difference in their health from when they signed up to when they get out. And it's not a traditional like SSDI. In that sense, it's closer to workers' comp because you're evaluating what happened at work and you're paying them specifically for those injuries.
And really, if this was called VA workers' compensation or military compensation, um, you'd avoid what's kind of a stigma by using the word disability, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and it actually one of the I think it actually is technically called VA service compensation, but it has become known as disability compensation. And yeah, that's just not only does it affect the way civilians that don't know how the system works view it, it also affects the way a lot of military veterans and active duty view it because the word disability comes with a stigma. Um, they also often think that there's some kind of, finite pool of money that only a certain number of people can qualify for, and that they'd be taking benefits away from someone else if they were to claim theirs, when really that's not the case.
Yeah, we run into that all the time, where people think, well, I've got an injury that's related to service, but I don't want to take benefits away from somebody else. I'm pretty fine compared to a lot of other guys. And as you say, that's just not the case. And nobody in the civilian world would think, well, I got injured on the job. I should get uh, some workers' compensation. Nobody would ever say, well, I'm not going to go in because maybe somebody else in the company, uh, I'm taking benefits away from them. That's just sort of a bit of a crazy idea, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a very crazy idea, and I hear it so much, and I see it posted online so much, and it really is a huge misconception people have. You're not taking something away by claiming a benefit that's owed to you by a contract that you signed.
It is a part of this that the general press doesn't understand the system and therefore they kind of cast it in a negative light.
Yeah, I also think people with the budget right now, I think people are kind of looking at what the most expensive things are also, and VA healthcare is up there, but they really don't understand the system because when they see the word disability, they think, the SSDI, like you shouldn't be able to work. And then I can't tell you how many emails I get from people that are just like neighbors of a veteran that are like, well, I know he gets disability, but he also has a job. How do I report fraud? And I'm like, that's
Right.
not fraud. It's unless you're on TDIU, which is, based off of individual unemployability, um, that it's not fraud to have a job and also receive your workers' compensation.
It's part of it too is that misunderstanding that with Social Security disability, it's all or none, right?
Hmm.
You're 100% disabled or you're not.
Yep.
In the VA program for service-connected injuries, it's very fragmented. It may just be for an elbow or for knees or a bad back or something else. It's not all or none, is it?
No, no, it's people have and VA math is pretty wild. It doesn't add up. It doesn't quite add up like you normally think it would add up, but yeah, it's fragmented. One person will be getting, around $4,000 a month or so or something if they are, 100%, and then somebody else will just be getting like a couple of $100 if they have a lower percentage. It's based on your service record, which it is based on your service record, so you need to make sure to record these things.
Well,
Don't,
a good example of that, right, is hearing loss, right? You
yeah,
get a few $100, that's all it ever gets. Just because you have that disability doesn't mean you can't work gainfully employed doing something else.
right.
Um, you wrote recent media coverage and political rhetoric have increasingly treated VA disability as a cultural or moral issue rather than a legal and institutional one, distorting public understanding of what the program is and why it exists. How do you correct that?
Oh, that is tough. I think it's educating people. That's one of the reasons I wrote the article. Um, and getting the word out there. Maybe we should, try to be careful about calling it disability. I know that we're used to the term, but just say VA compensation or veterans compensation. Uh, Make sure you understand the system yourself. I mean, that's a big part of why people don't get the compensation that they deserve always is because they don't understand how the system works. And, so you should educate yourself on the system and then educate others.
And one of the things too that is a little bit different than in a workers' comp situation, a lot of folks join the military, they're 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. And, jumping out of airplanes has caused their knees to go bad. Well, that's going to last a lifetime, isn't it?
Hmm. Yeah, and you should. uh, A lot of people constantly hear this say, well, I didn't have time to go to medical. My command wouldn't let me go to medical. They can't stop you from going to medical. You have to, you have to think about your future. and operate, obviously follow lawful orders, but telling you that you're not allowed to go to medical is not lawful. Um,
Well, a 19-year-old Marine is slap some icy hot on it, tape it up, and go back out, right? There's a sort of
right,
a
right. But
cultural
still, get
mentality.
it documented. Because without that documentation, you're not going to get what you deserve, and you may sprain your ankle or pull something or, fracture your knee, something might happen and then you get over it and it's fine for a few years, but then you get out and then once you hit 35 or 40, now you're having issues with it. So it may not hurt at the time that you're getting out and you may feel okay, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be that way forever. So people really need to go. I mean, I still have every chit, even when I had a cold. I kept copies of everything. Anytime I went and got a scan, I went straight out to the lobby and demanded that they give me a copy of the disc. And, I kept, because I had heard horror stories about, oh, my scans got lost and, now they're saying there's no proof. So it should
Yeah,
not work that way, but it does.
and it's I think today's veterans are more attuned to that, and with electronic records, it's easier to get copies of things. If you go back 10 or 20 years or more, when it was all paper, boy, stuff got lost like crazy, and you can't establish what the service connection and the medical nexus, which you need for the compensation. You actually, and I kind of like this. I don't know that the Congress would ever take it up, but you say let's rename it. Let's call it military occupational injury benefits. I mean, I think that's a clever idea that helps correct this fallacy that people are freeloading on disability while they work. Um, you've written this a few months back. Have you gotten any feedback on folks who are going, yeah, this is the stigma. I'm glad you talked about it. How do we fix it?
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of feedback on this particular article, and I haven't really had anybody that at least knows the system disagree with me. Of course, I've gotten, some emails that, complain about how they didn't get their benefits, and usually when I start asking them what happened, it's because, well, I didn't have time to go to medical. Well, you know, you got to make time to go to medical if you want your benefit. And also, I think you mentioned a minute ago that more people are getting the benefits now because they know the system better, and uh, people are kind of treating it as evidence of fraud because so many people are getting benefits. And granted, with any system, you're gonna have some fraud, okay? But fraud in this case is like you're telling the VA that you can't walk and you're showing up to the VA in a wheelchair and then you go run a marathon on the weekend. Okay, that is fraud. You should not do that. But you know, having a job and functioning after the military is what you're supposed to do in life. And, in the military, you're taught to push through things, you're taught to, compartmentalize issues. And it's almost like people just, if you get the compensation, they think that you should have to rot.
Yeah, it's crazy the way some of the general press has written on this that you somehow maybe they think it's you should have a disincentive to work. I mean, you're not going to get rich on the compensation you get from the VA for your service-connected injuries. You're not even
No.
going to have the lifestyle you're going to have is pretty limited.
Hmm.
These writers who talk about, well, this is fiscally irresponsible. Again, I'm back to I don't think they understand what it's about.
Yeah, they don't understand what it's about. They don't understand the process, and they don't understand why we're seeing more claims, which also, there's the PACT Act, and people are doing the claims for toxic exposure now, and so, obviously you're going to have more people getting the VA benefits because of this. And that's if they're owed them, then they should get them, you know. But
There's that's another good example of maybe the general press, not somebody who's writing for a military outlet and somebody who's been in the Marine Corps. You understand it, but the general press doesn't understand what exposures we're talking about. Back in the day, you couldn't even convince people that Agent Orange was bad. Now we're at the stage where, and particularly in the wars coming out of Afghanistan, where there's so many rotations, so much up tempo, you were exposed to it for long periods of time. You'd come back to the States, forbidden, you'd go back and do it again. So toxic exposure at bases stateside and overseas, it wasn't even a thought 10 years ago.
yeah,
Now
I mean,
people are thinking about it.
now every time I go to the VA, they ask me about, hey, were you exposed to anything toxic? Every time. This has happened within the last year that they've started asking me this, So I mean, it's fairly a new thing that they really dig into this and care about it.
Well, I think this is a great article. I would hope somebody in Congress might pay attention and go, maybe there's something we can do to remove the stigma. That's really what I'm talking about, is the stigma that just because a veteran is carrying some disability rating, they don't become useless people because of that.
Yeah.
They're simply being compensated for a work injury.
Yeah, and and the attitude around it right now makes it seem like people believe that you should be useless if you get any kind of compensation. But then if someone just sat around and got the compensation, and people knew that they had the capacity to work, then they'd be called lazy. So
You're not going to win. You're not going to win on this, are you?
yeah.
Let me take a few minutes to switch gears on you, because you wrote another interesting article that I want you to talk about. And it's a proposed bill. It's important to say to people this is just an idea in Congress, and many of these proposed bills never get anywhere. But the bill's called the Love Lives On Act, to try to correct this issue of spousal support upon remarriage after the veteran who had a disability connection dies. So tell us a little bit about what caught your attention and why you wrote about this.
I I wrote about this because I was talking to um, the CEO of a nonprofit, and I wrote another story about it. They're going to DC to talk to members of Congress about this bill, and there's several bills that were impacting spouses, uh, and this was one of them. And that was the first time I had heard of this one, and so I just thought it was interesting, and that
So let me frame it. A spouse, a veteran has a disability compensation, dies because of that service-connected injury. The spouse can receive dependency and indemnity compensation, or what's commonly known as DIC, but they only get it as long as they don't remarry before the age of 55. If they
right.
if they remarry, they lose that
Hmm.
as if it never happened,
Hmm.
and so there's sort of a equity issue involved here. Tell us what you were thinking as you were researching and writing on this proposed act.
Um, I mean, I was kind of thinking about what people are going to say about it. I know plenty of people that do not like the idea of this because they think that, the spouse didn't technically serve, and if you remarry, then you essentially replace the absence of, another person that's going to be contributing to the household. And the idea of the compensation is to, you know, kind of make up for the loss of a breadwinner. And remarrying kind of nullifies that, because then you have somebody else in the house that's bringing an income. But also, this person lost their loved one because they served, So I think it's reasonable that they get something.
Yeah, and you wrote the benefit reflects a promise made to the service member that their family will be supported,
Yeah.
independent of future personal decisions. We hear that all the time, where the veteran says, well, what's going to happen to my spouse?
Hmm.
Isn't that part of the contract here between the service member and the government? Like, I'm going to go do this, but if I get injured or I have a disability, service-connected disability, and it results in my death, isn't the contract you're going to take care of the family a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. And right now it's almost like, yeah, we'll take care of the family unless someone else steps in to do it. Um, but I mean that would almost be like, if they just gave you VA disability until you got a full-time job and got, the opportunity to get insurance. Like, okay, now that you have insurance, you can't come to the VA anymore. Um, you know,
It's a little bit of taking away benefits you've earned,
yeah.
the veteran has earned. And in some regards, they've earned them for their spouse.
Hmm.
Uh, were you able to sort of trace back, is this just a financial problem? Is this really just, oh my goodness, it might cost the government more money? Why isn't this corrected? Did you get any insight into why this sort of archaic provision still exists today?
Um, I don't have any insight from members of Congress themselves, but in speaking with people that are, on the Hill fairly often, they think that it's more of just a funding issue that, like, you know, they, the government, they're going to prioritize the bills, and, they don't see some as important as others. And
Yeah, you often sort of feel like, well, this is just a money issue.
yeah, yeah,
They just don't want to pay the freight if they can find a way out of it. You
yeah.
conclude that particular article. I want to read this quote. It touches on how the government defines its responsibility to families after a service member's death, and whether that responsibility changes as those family members rebuild their lives. I mean, that really sums it up, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they are, punishing people for moving on with their life. I mean, I get that, if I were to lose a spouse, I would be very sad for the rest of my life about it, but at some point I would have to move on if I didn't want to just shrivel up and die of depression. So, and I don't think anybody, if someone dies, I don't think that their dying wish would be that their family would be stuck just thinking about their death sad forever. I think they'd want them to move on and want them to be happy. And, I think this kind of punishes people for doing that a little bit.
Yeah, I think so as well. We've been speaking to Haley Fuller. She writes as a regular contributing writer for military.com, has always very interesting take on things as she brings forth. Haley, where can people follow you or track what you're writing so that they can catch the latest stuff?
I am on military.com, and then I also have a LinkedIn, but I don't have any social media connected to my writing. I might start an X account soon. I've never had a Twitter or an X, so we'll see.
If you find yourself bored, which you won't,
Yeah.
you can do all those other things. So I'd encourage folks, you can put in military.com, search for Haley Fuller, and her articles will pop up, and you can kind of read what's new. And she's cranking something out pretty regularly here, almost daily. So,
Mhm.
Haley, thanks for spending a little time with Veterans Radio today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Faussone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook
and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows
by visiting us at veteransradio.org. That's veteransradio.org. We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, NVBDC.org, Legal Help for Veterans, a veterans disability law firm with a national practice before the VA, can help you on your claims and your appeals. It can be reached at legalhelpforveterans.com or 1-800-693-4800. We also want to thank our local sponsors. This would include the Charles S. Kettles chapter of the Vietnam Veterans of America, that's chapter 310, VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423, the American Legion Irwin Preskin Post 46 in Ann Arbor as well, the VA Ann Arbor Healthcare System, and certainly the National Vietnam Veterans of America Association. You can be a sponsor by going to veteransradio.org, clicking on the About Us and our sponsors, and help us out. Keep this program alive for the 21 and 22 years. Keep us going for another 20. Thank you.